Mr. Martinez was a small group of 10 students, and we were an unusually tight-knit bunch. When Mr. Martinez taught us the past imperfect, he did something that was both innovative and meaningful while setting up our class conversation using the past imperfect. He asked us to talk about something a friend or family member had accomplished, something remarkable that was a result of their persistent efforts from the past. My classmates shared surprisingly personal stories. Some students talked about family members who were the first to graduate from college, or friends who had overcome tough home environments. Others talked about the sacrifices their immigrant parents had made to give their kids better opportunities in life. None of the stories was the same, but they were all inspiring tales about people who had reached new heights based on their life experience, and by doing so, lifted up those around them through their sheer determination. The 10 students in that class seemed to represent the main social groups of most high schools in the United States, including the head cheerleader, a football star, a punk rocker with purple hair, and an awkward person or two. We looked like a high school movie cliche. What I realized in that moment was that once we got past the surface, there were common aspirations and fears that ran through each person's narrative. There was something about speaking about people we admired in the past imperfect that made us recognize how much other people had continually sacrificed to kindly help us along in life. From my perspective, I also realized that my classmates' stories were built on a bedrock of meaningful details, small but significant acts that their loved ones performed over the course of years. When people became emotional, it was when they recalled habitual details, like a mother waking up every morning at 4:30 for 17 years to provide for her children, or an older sibling who patiently helped a dyslexic student for years until she learned to read at grade level. Through the shared wisdom in that classroom, I saw with brilliant clarity that the beauty of our social relationships is not about social awkwardness or social skill, but rather comes from our kind attention to thousands of social details. Afterward. Authors develop a relationship with their books. I know that sounds strange, but even the most systematic authors will tell you that books take on a life of their own. Authors try to communicate their ideas through pages of a manuscript. Months later, when they revisit those pages to begin the editing process, the book offers new perspectives that were not apparent to the authors who created those pages. It's like the relationship people have with a city where they once lived. When they return to their beloved city and familiar places that are full of nostalgia, there is something about the collision of the familiarity with one's past life, with one's present life, that creates new insights. As I started the previous chapter, I started looping back to earlier chapters I had not read in months. Doing so stirred an unusual degree of self-reflection within me. As I read about my Mr. Fuji wrestling fiasco, my mouthful of Kelly Kimpton's hair on the dance floor, or my memories about a friend who has passed, I re-experienced the gravitas of an awkward disposition that I had spent so much of my life trying to unload, but also felt new insights about how my awkwardness had shaped my life for the better. In the end, life has worked out well. I have been blessed with a generous and nurturing group of friends and family who remained loyal through my most awkward stretches. My family and mentors have helped me pursue a career that I find challenging and that allows me to absorb myself in systematic investigations about broad topics, such as what makes romantic relationships work or the advantages that might result from being someone who is socially awkward. In matters of work and play, I feel grateful for how everything has turned out. I'm not entirely sure why my life has worked out so well. I can think about the ways that pro-social attitudes or how my deliberate practice to meet minor social expectations eventually turned into social proficiency. But I do not understand my social life as a smooth, flowing narrative. Awkward people make sense of things with a bottom-up process, which means that realizations happen abruptly for them, like a chemical reaction that reaches a threshold for changing colors or igniting in an explosion. Awkward people are prone to being surprised, which can manifest as rude awakenings when outcomes are bad or as a magical event when outcomes are good. When I first embarked on this book, my friend Andy once asked me if I wished that I had not been awkward. It was a thought-provoking question, one that I contemplated for quite some time, but eventually I realized that I am largely grateful for my awkwardness. Although there have been many instances when I dearly wished that social life was more intuitive and I am guilt-ridden by times my awkwardness has caused trouble for other people. I also think that being awkward can be humbling, and I think that it can instill a particular kind of empathy for others who do not fit the traditional societal mold. Awkward people often feel like the social world is too chaotic to be systemized. But we have seen throughout this book that social science can help us unearth some reasonable and predictable social rules. The scientific method helps bring order to chaos, allows us to see relationships between ideas, and even helps us to predict what might happen. The social science we have suggests that awkward people have a spotlighted focus that shines narrowly and brightly on specific areas of interest. Awkward individuals default to focusing on their specific areas of interest, which tend to be non-social interests, and this means that they are prone to missing social cues that are obvious to others. When awkward people's behaviors deviate from minor social expectations, others interpret those deviations as small signs that someone might not be on board with the collective goals and values of the group, and that's where the trouble begins. But the science of why we're awkward can also be applied to help awkward people think about where to intentionally train their gaze in social situations. It tells us why social graces are an important mechanism to master, and provides a rough roadmap about how likable people think about social life. My hope is that the data and theory available at this point might provide a structure for awkward individuals who are looking for some traction and rough maps for navigating social life. Social science can never tell a certain person exactly how to handle every situation, but it can provide some guidance for people to craft their own path that is necessarily unique to each individual. Awkward people do not need to become popular or maintain dozens of friendships. The happiest people focus on forging a handful of gratifying social ties as the centerpiece of their lives. Awkward people need to devote the same concentrated focus to their social relationships that they would give to their work or other areas of non-social interest. Fair attitude, kind disposition, and loyal commitment. When these qualities are reciprocated between two people or a small group, then the psychological weight of those ties grows exponentially, and it exerts the kind of gravitational pull necessary to keep awkward people passionately pursuing groundbreaking innovation in a stable orbit. Awkward people are not better than anyone else, they are simply different. Although they may have abilities or dispositions that give them great potential in some areas, awkward individuals are challenged by social situations that come naturally to most people. Awkward people do not deserve some sort of special treatment, but they can certainly benefit from some patience, an open-minded approach to their quirks, and support for the things they want to achieve in life. It's the same thing that any of us want, awkward or not. The theories and scientific findings we have reviewed in the previous chapters give us a way to understand why people are awkward and how they can redirect their attention to better understand and manage social situations. But logic and theory only take one so far. If-then rules about how to handle various social situations and generally accepted rules of etiquette are still subject to unpredictability because they are being applied to humans who are variable in nature. In human interactions, 1 plus 1 does not always equal 2, and combining two elements does not always produce the same compound. It's this variability in the human condition that makes people maddening and wonderful. The history of psychology suggests that there are many routes to a meaningful and happy life, and there's good reason to be suspicious of anyone who espouses a one-size-fits-all approach to social or emotional fulfillment. But one of the most consistent findings in psychology is that a meaningful and happy life is strongly associated with the quality of people's social relationships. I see now that the best things in life have come from the unpredictable and subtle acts of kindness and loyalty that have far exceeded anything I could have reasonably imagined. When I've had the presence of mind to slow my spotlighted attention, to purposefully direct it away from the search for a missing fact or piece of data, I have found that I am pulled toward a sense of belonging that delightfully pushes the limits of my emotional capacity. While the unpredictable elements of social life can be frustrating for me, the most meaningful moments in my life have involved people acting in unpredictable ways. Life is full of people who defy our expectations, whether parents with remarkable patience, a teacher who helps you to see clearly, the kind words of a Spanish girl, a friend who embodies the power of being pro-social, or a teacher who helps you see the future in a new way. When we set our sharp focus on these remarkable people who grace our lives, when we appreciate the ways they exceed our expectations in the most unexpected ways, that's when we begin to see in brilliant detail how awesome this life can be.